Some people fix broken things for a living. Claire Bennett fixed broken farms, spreadsheets, debt, failure. All of it laid out in numbers she could solve without ever getting her hands dirty. She had spent 6 years turning around failing properties for the bank, and she had never once let herself feel anything for the land she saved. That was the rule. Numbers didn't break your heart. People did. She didn't know. As her car rattled up the gravel drive toward Hargrove Farm that gray October morning, that this would be the property that broke every rule she'd built her life around. She didn't know his name yet. She only knew the file. 42 acres, 3 generations deep in debt, 90 days from foreclosure. What she found instead, standing in the mist by a half-collapsed barn with a shotgun-straight spine and eyes that looked like they'd already lost the fight, was a man who would undo everything she thought she understood about being unbreakable. His name was Jack Hargrove, and in 90 days, either she would save his farm or fall in love with the man she was sent to take it from. Claire had grown up on a farm just like this one. Different state, same smell of hay and diesel and rain on tin roofs, a smell that used to mean home, before it started meaning grief. Her father had run their family farm until the bank took it when she was 17, and she remembered standing in the driveway watching him hand over the keys to a stranger in a gray suit, watching something in him go quiet forever. She had promised herself she would never be that helpless again, so she became the one in the gray suit instead. She told herself it was practical. She told herself numbers didn't lie, didn't leave, didn't die slowly of a broken heart the way her father had. She had a fiancé once, too, a broker named Grant who liked her ambition until the day it inconvenienced him, who left 3 weeks before their wedding with a text, message, and no real explanation. After that, Claire built a wall so precise, so well engineered, that even she sometimes forgot it was there. Numbers didn't leave. Land didn't leave. People did. So she stopped trusting people and started trusting spreadsheets. Jack Hargrove had built a wall of his own, though his was made of something heavier than heartbreak. 2 years ago, his older brother, Daniel, had been running the farm's Eastfield irrigation line when the tractor rolled on the slope by the creek. Jack had been 30 yards away. He still heard the sound some nights, the metallic groan and then the silence after, a silence so total it had never really left him. He inherited the farm that same week, not because he wanted it, but because someone had to, and there was no one else left to want it. He hadn't updated the book since. He hadn't let anyone help since. He barely let himself grieve since, because grieving meant stopping, and stopping meant the debt would catch up to him even faster than it already had. So when Claire Bennett stepped out of a car that cost more than his last harvest and told him she was there on behalf of Cedar Ridge Bank to conduct a 90-day viability assessment, Jack didn't see a woman. He saw the gray suit. He saw the stranger who was going to hand him the same fate his father, and now his brother's memory had already paid for once. "You can turn around," he told her, not unkindly but with the flat finality of a man who had said this sentence in his head 100 times before she ever arrived. "I don't need a consultant. I need the bank to leave me alone long enough to fix this myself." "You have 90 days, Claire said. And from what I can see, she nodded toward the barn roof sagging like a broken back. "You don't have a plan." "I'm not here to take your farm, Mr. Hargrove. I'm here to see if there's anything left to save. And if there isn't, then I write the report that ends it faster than the bank would on its own." She said it evenly. The way she said everything, a woman who had learned that softness was a liability in rooms full of men deciding other people's futures, so it's in your interest to prove me wrong. Something in his jaw shifted. Not quite respect, not yet, but something that told her he wasn't used to people who didn't flinch. He gave her 30 days instead of turning her away. Mostly, he told himself, because the alternative was worse. She moved into the old caretaker's cottage at the edge of the property, a small stone building with a wood stove and a view of the east pasture where, if she looked at just the right angle in the evening light, she could pretend for a moment she was 17 again and her father was still calling her in for supper. The first 2 weeks were a quiet war. Claire went through the books line by line and found what she expected. A farm bleeding money not from mismanagement, but from grief. From 2 years of a man working himself past exhaustion. Instead of asking for help, he didn't believe anyone would give him. She found unpaid invoices Jack had simply stopped opening. She found an equipment lease he'd let lapse because he couldn't face another conversation with a banker. She found, tucked behind a filing cabinet, an unfinished letter to his brother that he had clearly started, writing and never been able to end. She didn't mention the letter, but she started looking at Jack differently after that. He, for his part, started noticing things about her he hadn't expected. The way she rolled her sleeves up without being asked when the fence line needed mending, even though nothing in her job description required manual labor. The way she actually knew, not from a textbook, how to read a herd's body language before a storm rolled in, calling the cattle in 20 minutes before the sky opened up, saving them from a soaking that would have cost him vet bills he couldn't afford. The way she went quiet just for a second, whenever she passed the tire swing near the farmhouse, the kind of quiet that told him she was carrying something too, even if she never said what. "You didn't learn that from a spreadsheet," he said one evening, watching her check a heifer's leg with steady, practiced hands. "I grew up on a farm," she said, and then, because it slipped out before she could stop it, we lost it. Bank foreclosure, when I was 17. Jack didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "That why you do this job? Get to the farms before the bank does?" "Something like that," she admitted, surprised at how much lighter it felt to say out loud. "I used to think if I could just get there first, do the numbers right, nobody else would have to." Watch their father hand over the keys to a stranger, and now I'm standing in a field with a rancher who hates bankers, hoping I'm not too late for this one either. It was the closest either of them had come to honesty, and something shifted between them after that. Not a spark exactly, not yet, but a thaw, the kind that happens slowly after a long winter. 1 degree at a time until one day the ice just isn't there anymore. They worked the farm together through November. Claire restructured the debt, found a co-op willing to buy, Jack's grass-fed beef at a premium if he could scale up, negotiated a 90-day extension into a full season by showing the bank a 5-year recovery plan instead of a 90-day guess. Jack, in turn, started letting her in, not just to the books, but to the parts of the farm that mattered to him. The hill where he and Daniel used to watch the sun set. The barn he was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding beam by beam, because his brother had started the frame the summer before he died, and Jack couldn't bring himself to either finish it or tear it down. "I keep thinking if I just get it right," Jack admitted one night. The two of them, sitting on the porch steps with 2 mugs of coffee going cold between them. "It'll feel like he's still here." "Stupid, I know." "It's not stupid," Claire said quietly. "I still keep my dad's old pocket knife in my glove box. 12 years later. I don't even use it. I just need it there." "Grief doesn't really end, does it?" Jack said. "It just gets a place to live." "No," Claire agreed. "It doesn't end." They sat there a long moment, the cold air sharp and clean, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of 2 people who had spent years building walls out of loss and were, for the first time, letting someone stand close enough to see over them. The near kiss came on a night neither of them planned. A storm had knocked a fence down in the north pasture, and they'd spent hours in the freezing rain chasing down cattle, laughing despite themselves at the absurdity of it, soaked through and exhausted, and more alive than either of them had felt in years. Back at the farmhouse, toweling off in front of the wood stove, Jack reached out to brush a strand of wet hair from Claire's face, and for a moment the entire world narrowed down to the 3 inches of space between them. Then Claire's phone rang. It was the bank. The moment broke, but it didn't disappear. It just waited. The call was the complication that always comes right before the fall. Cedar Ridge Bank's regional director, a man named Whitfield who had never once set foot on the property, had overridden Claire's recovery plan. He wanted the farm liquidated to a development group offering to buy the land outright and turn it into vacation properties. A faster, cleaner return than a 5-year recovery plan built on grass-fed beef contracts and a rancher's stubborn hope. Claire had 2 days to either produce results that made the recovery plan undeniable, or watch Jack lose everything anyway, this time with her signature on the report that ended it. "You knew this could happen," Jack said when she told him. His voice flat in a way that scared her more than shouting would have. "The whole time. You knew they might pull the plug no matter what we did. I didn't think they would. Not after the co-op contract. Not after what, Claire? Not after we started." He stopped himself, jaw tight, and looked away toward the hill where his brother used to sit. "I let you in. I let you see all of it. And you're still the one who's going to write the report." "Then let me write a different one," she said, stepping toward him, refusing to let the old wall go back up between them now that she'd finally seen past her own. "Let me fight for it. For you." "Why would you do that? It's not your farm. It's not your career on the line." "Because I watched my father lose everything, and I told myself I'd never let it happen again to anyone. She stopped, but it was too late to take the word back, and they both knew what she'd almost said. Claire spent the next 36 hours doing something she had never once done in 6 years at Cedar Ridge Bank. She went around her boss. She called the co-op directly and secured a signed 5-year purchase agreement instead of a verbal commitment. She reached out to 2 neighboring ranchers who agreed to a shared equipment arrangement that would cut Jack's operating costs by nearly a third. She drove 2 hours to the regional office and sat across from Whitfield's desk with a binder thick enough to end the argument before it started, laying out number by number why the farm was worth more standing than sold, and why, for the first time in her career, she wasn't just presenting a recovery plan. She was defending a home. "This is more than a recommendation," Whitfield said, flipping through the binder. "This reads like you're invested." "I am," Claire said simply. "I should have been invested a long time ago in all of them. I just didn't let myself be until this one." Whitfield approved the plan. Not because Claire pleaded, because the numbers, backed by her conviction, were undeniable. The development group's offer was withdrawn from consideration. Hargrove Farm was saved. She drove back that same evening, the sun dropping low and gold over the fields, her hands still shaking slightly from the meeting, and found Jack exactly where she somehow knew he'd be, up on the hill overlooking the farmhouse, the place he went when the weight of everything got too heavy to carry, inside 4 walls. "It's done," she said, climbing up beside him, out of breath. "The farm's yours. Full 5-year plan, approved, no liquidation. The co-op deal, the equipment share, all of it." Jack turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived on that gray October morning, she saw something in his face that wasn't grief and wasn't guardedness. It was disbelief, softening slowly into something that looked almost like hope. "You did that," he said. "For a farm you're not even getting paid extra to save." "I didn't do it for a farm," Claire said. I did it because somewhere in the last 90 days, this stopped being a case file and started being the place I think about when I think about home. And you stopped being a case file too. Claire, I know it's complicated. I know I'm the woman who was sent here to end this. And instead He didn't let her finish. He closed the distance between them the way he hadn't let himself do on the night of the storm. And this time there was no phone call to interrupt it, no wall left standing on either side. When he kissed her, it felt like everything they'd both spent years bracing against had finally been allowed to land softly instead of shattering. I built that wall the day Daniel died, Jack said quietly, his forehead resting against hers. Told myself I couldn't lose one more thing. And then you showed up in a car that cost more than my harvest, telling me you were here to assess whether I was worth saving. And somehow you became the first person in 2 years I actually wanted to let in. I built mine the day the bank took my dad's farm, Claire said. Told myself numbers were safer than people. Then I met a rancher who taught me that some things are worth the risk of losing. Because the alternative, never letting yourself have them at all, isn't really safety. It's just a slower kind of loss. Below them, the farmhouse lights flickered on in the dusk, warm gold against the deepening blue. The barn Jack had spent 2 years rebuilding standing whole for the first time, since his brother started it. It wasn't finished. Neither of them were, not completely. Grief doesn't work that way, and love this new doesn't erase 2 years of loss overnight. But for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, broken didn't feel like the end of the story. It felt like the beginning of a different one. 6 months later, the co-op contract had turned Hargrove Farm from a foreclosure file into the most profitable grass-fed operation in the county. Claire had left Cedar Ridge Bank to run the farm's books full-time. Not because anyone forced her hand, but because she'd finally found the one property she never wanted to hand over to someone else's care. The barn was finished. Every beam Daniel had started now standing under a new roof. A small brass plate at its base reading simply, "Built by 2 brothers. Finished by family." And on the hill where Jack used to sit alone with his grief, there were 2 people now most evenings, watching the sun go down over land that had almost been lost, saved not by a spreadsheet, in the end, but by 2 broken hearts that had finally stopped guarding themselves long enough to be mended.